So when we talk about plotting, we're referring to the idea of creating an outline and a blueprint for your novel before you begin to write. I mentioned in my other video that I was a much bigger fan of this method than pantsing. Just having tried it, having tried things both ways, I do find that the plotting method works much better. Just for the simple fact that having everything laid out for you makes it much easier to write and to revise later. It's a lot easier to revise something that structurally is sound than having to do a complete rewrite of a work that you just pantsed and you discovered that, halfway through the story wasn't working and you just kind of, finagled an ending or a second half that it kind of satisfies the story, but you realize that there's a lot to be fixed. The main critiques of plotting, generally I find there are two. The first is that people that plot, they tend to be so rigid with their stories that they don't leave any room for organic growth with their stories. As you write, you might just find that there's a better direction for your story as you sort of go along. Just organically, something might spring up where a plot line, just in the writing, a plot line reveals itself, or a better way to do things reveals itself. And people that are very rigid to their structures don't give them that chance to allow that break in the refinement of it. That tends to be probably the most basic level of issues with plotting is just the adherence to that. I suppose that also creates a level of boredom as well. So that ties into just if you're going to plot your story out, the plotting part is really exciting. It's really fun. The writing part, though, isn't always as exciting as when you pants. When you pants, everything feels so fresh. It can be a bit more exciting. And I will say there's an element of needing to be a professional in a sense that when you write, you shouldn't necessarily be chasing the excitement. You shouldn't be, chasing, the fun aspect of writing. That shouldn't be what determines your skill. If it's more boring to plot something, but the work comes out better, you should approach it with more I think a more professional mindset and go with the plotting and ignore the idea that, well, it's just not as fun because it's not as spontaneous what I'm doing. Now, the other critique, and this is the far more important one in my opinion, it's that when people plot, they often aren't focusing on the correct things. And what I mean by that is people that plot, they tend to plot out the plot, right? They write out the actual events A, B, C, D, one after another basically, right? They write out the storyline events, but they don't first establish the character side of things first. So they have all these sort of plot points, like these events happen, this battle happens here, this next thing happens here, but they haven't actually bothered to establish what their characters are and what their desires are, and they haven't based their plot around that first. I'll do a separate video on kind of going more into this, but the main thing you want to do when you plot is first know your characters. That needs to come really before you start laying out the actual events of the story. And this is in regards to genre too. This isn't something just for like lit fic or something like that. I mean, anything you write, any sort of genre, even if there's a certain structure to that genre, like if it's a detective novel, there's a certain structure that detective novels all tend to follow, right? Crime, detective, several clues lead up to this, they eventually discover the bad guy, showdown, right? Even with that, you need to first discover your character first, and then begin to lay out the plot in regards to what they desire, and then more importantly, what they truly desire. And again, I'll do this in the video probably. I might throw it tomorrow, but that is the main issue I tend to find, is that people tend to focus too much on the surface level plot and not enough of building from the character first. It's almost an inverse, where they do the plot first, then sort of construct characters that fit their plot, when I think it should be the other way around. You should construct your characters first and their desires, and then build your plot around that instead. But that's it. So those are the two main issues. Again, the issue of constructing plots around plot rather than around character is the main one I would encourage people to be more cognizant of. But, you know, with that being said, of the two methods, again, I tend to advocate for plotting much more than pantsing. I'm sure there are people that are going to find, you know, success with pantsing, but I think if you are deciding on which one you want to do, or you haven't maybe had success really with either, I would consider sticking with plotting, but kind of revising the process of how you do that instead. But yeah, that's my my insights on that. I'll make a video tomorrow just going over more about what I was describing with the idea of character and character desire, and how to start your story with that first.